my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. And today we're going to be talking about awareness on the show today. I'm going to weave in and out, but I'm going to share a conversation that I had through my mastermind group, the Just Be Social Club. And just sort of, you know, I feel like I tend to come here with, in real time, things that I am sort of at times struggling with, at times trying to make sense of, and, you know, things that I am just trying to hold a mirror up to myself about. You know, I think the difficult part about life and our journey and in our path and all these different things, I think many of us weren't sort of taught a healthy way to go about it. And that's not just in our community, but I think as a society in general, we just have a lot of really terrible ideas on happiness and success and what our lives are supposed to look like. And this sort of permanence that happens, right? And I've touched on this, you know, a bunch throughout the course of the seasons, probably this season as well. But just sort of having awareness and having conversations with yourself about where you're at and what you honestly want and what is truly making you happy and fulfilled. And I try to check in with myself on a fairly regular basis, and maybe too regularly, right? I think there's probably such a thing as too much self-awareness or too much awareness that sort of takes you out of the present moment and the journey itself. But, you know, for me, you know, I always like to be upfront and honest. You know, I've been chasing a goal or a career or success in entertainment since I was 17 years old. You know, I'm now 36 years old, which is crazy to even say. You know, so we're talking about almost 20 years of me on this journey of making a career out of my passion and making a career out of something in the entertainment industry and in the creative field in general, you know? And I often, as we go through the ups and downs inevitably of our lives and particularly, you know, this industry, sort of the ridiculously high highs and the very low lows, you know, I often sort of sit myself down after sort of going through one of these battles and one of these sort of these sort of crises in moments of disappointment or whatever it might be. And I ask myself, you know, is this currently what I really want? Or do I still want this dream, this goal? Or am I holding on to like what 17-year-old me wanted, what 20-something-year-old me wanted, right? Or early 30s me wanted, right? And I have that very real conversation with myself, you know, and I go back and forth on it a lot of times, you know, because of all that comes with particularly working in this field. And I think each field has its own sort of positives and negatives and things of that nature. I can't really speak to everybody's particular career path or whatever it might be. So as always, sort of take from this what makes sense for you or apply it to your life as you see fit. But I think, you know, this is a very difficult path. It's the path of an entrepreneur in general, of really creating your own way, you know, and there's no easy answers. There's no real stability. I mean, I would argue most jobs don't have actual stability. But, you know, there is a little bit more consistency in jobs that have a paycheck that you can count on rather than one that you have to continue to create, you know, on a regular basis. And you know, with all of that, I check in because, you know, this is exhausting work at the end of the day, like anybody else's job is. And I would hate to be in a place that I keep doing the same thing just because it's what I'm used to or what I'm comfortable with, rather than it's actually making me happy still, or feels like it's purpose driven, right? So, I've am at that point again, kind of in my normal cycle that I go through, where I'm questioning everything and really trying to strip away a lot of the noise, a lot of the ego and the identity that I've attached to this career and this job and the different titles and accolades that I hold, and sort of just get down to, what do I really want at this point in life? Because again, it changes as we get older. What I wanted in my 20s is drastically different than what I want right now in my 30s. The things that made me happy back then don't really fulfill me much anymore. So it's always having these conversations, being open to the pivot, having the awareness, and I think also getting rid of the shame that comes along if we decide to change course, or we decide to sort of give up on a particular version of our dream or our idea, right? Because we realize it no longer suits us. And these are all very difficult sort of conversations to have with oneself, and to know exactly where you are. And they're things that I struggle with a lot, and particularly because of this feeling of being an outsider and wanting different things, or feeling like I was different growing up, or whatever the case may be, or even just being in a family that has never experienced somebody creating a career out of their creativity and their passion. It's a very lonely journey in figuring this out, right? It doesn't feel like there's many people you could sort of go to figure out what you should or shouldn't do when these sort of existential crises sort of happen. So, this is sort of a conversation that I just wanted to share, because I think it is an important reminder to sort of have, especially as we're getting to like this halfway mark in the year, right? A lot of people maybe have taken the advice or taken it upon themselves to set goals and things like that. And it's good to sort of assess where you're at, right? And not necessarily like judging yourself like, oh my God, I'm a loser because I haven't achieved said goal that I set out for myself, but more from a place of like, okay, we've been on this path, this journey, regardless of like the results of our goal. Where are we mentally? How do we actually feel, right? Because I think even if you haven't achieved a particular goal, when you are on the path of what you feel is your purpose or the thing that makes you happy, even if it's not checking all of the boxes or all getting all of the accolades you would have hoped, there still has been a lot of joy along the way that sort of reminds you like, oh yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be, right? And I think that's sort of the conversation we need to sort of have with ourselves is halfway through the year at this point, and checking in with some of these goals where it's like, okay, is this really fulfilling me in the way that I thought it would? Or is it time to maybe just open my eyes a little bit, broaden my horizons, and see if there might be something else that I'm missing right now that potentially could be the thing for me, right? I think we sort of, as a society, like, the people who are always like, oh, they're always trying something new. They never quite we like, and I'm guilty of this as well, where we talk down upon them as if people who sort of jump around a little bit, they're like a cautionary tale almost, But the reality is, you don't know what you like until you try it, really, right? It's like food, It's like, how can you say you don't like something until you've actually tried it? Or dating. That's why dating is so difficult oftentimes, Some people are lucky enough that they find, their person pretty early on in life. Or others, sort of have to run the gamut of a lot of failed relationships before they are ready to settle down or realize what they like or what type of person they want to be with, and there's no one size fits all. And I think A$AP Rocky kind of has like this quote where he's like, how do you judge somebody for trying? And I'm paraphrasing and making it a little bit more family friendly, but that's the reality. Like, there's nothing wrong with trying things. There's nothing wrong with pivoting, with moving on, with things not being exactly what you thought or hoped they would be. We just have to keep sort of, it's the idea of like finding a key until one actually unlocks it, right? You have to be okay with that process and be okay with maybe the judgment that comes along from your family or those around you or just society in general telling you that, oh, you haven't figured it out by now? What's wrong with you? These are all just social constructs. They're not real things. They feel very real because we have sort of simulated a false meaning to the opinions of others and what we're supposed to be doing, quote unquote. But none of it is actually real in the terms of like, the only reason it has an effect on our life is because we allow it to. And again, that's easier said than done, right? It's easier to say, oh, I'm not going to let it bother me, when, it's often a lot harder in practice to not be bothered by the judgment of other people, particularly those closest to us. But, it's a practice that we have to sort of do our best to master as best as we can, right? As much as we can master anything in this life. And a lot of it is just this check-in. It's just this awareness. And it's also not beating yourself up, taking it easy on yourself, right? When things don't work out, when you fell short by your own metrics or whatever the case may be, it's all right. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to have it all figured out. There is no real such thing as failure, right? And it's just lessons along the way. And this is your reminder for anyone who needs to hear it. I mean, shit, I'm saying this to myself. Like, it's okay to not have it figured out, and shit, I'll be honest. Like, I feel like I don't have it figured out right now. I have a lot of questions about what I'm doing and where I'm going and what I want, moving forward in my life. And I'm trying to remind myself, like, it's all right. Like, you don't have to have it figured out. I think what I'm trying to get better at, and I'm giving you right now information and or advice that I'm trying to give to myself as well. So, this isn't from a place of like, oh, I've figured it out. I'm like, dude, I know the right answer. I'm trying to apply it, and maybe speaking out loud to others will allow me to apply it better. But it's taking it day by day. I don't know what I was watching or reading that they were. I think it's the Steal Like an Artist, the dude who wrote those books. But it's in practice, it's just taking it day by day, right? I think a lot of what fucks us up is thinking about, what does this mean in the grandiose terms of my life, right? And it's tough to not think about it in that way, especially when you are at a point, if you're at a point in your life where you feel like the walls are sort of closing in on you, right? If you are like financially strapped, or you just feel like life is sucking every bit of your soul out of you, and you're just stressed beyond belief for whatever reason, it's hard to just take it day by day, and to not feel like your back is against the wall and you have to have it figured out today, right? But reality is, when you think about it in those terms where it's like, I need this figured out yesterday, you're adding a burden and a stress to yourself that is not conducive to you actually finding the solution, right? Solutions come from clarity. You have to have clarity to be creative, to figure things out, right? You being stressed and feeling like your back is against the wall is not necessarily the best sort of environment for you to produce the best results. It's incredibly sort of toxic and again, not conducive towards us bringing out the best version of ourselves, And that's what I'm trying to sort of do as I hold this mirror up and think about what I really want next, is like, take it day by day, just try to win the day, win the hour, win the minute, whatever it might be, every little step along the way. Like, how do I just sort of, win these little battles, and knowing that eventually it's going to add up to something, right? That if I just sort of, because I think it's easy to get so stressed out that you then freeze in place, right? And you don't end up doing anything because you're just too stressed to do it. I've been there. I'm like, fuck it. I'm emotionally exhausted. I'm just going to go to bed. I'm not doing anything today. I'm going to go take a nap. I'm going to do this. I'm going to just go out and meet my friends, wherever, at the bar or whatever the fuck it might be. Just something mindless. I'm going to just watch this movie mindlessly. And I think that is sort of what we sometimes have to push past. And sometimes you do need those things, but other times you have to say, you know what, I don't feel like doing this, but let me at least sit down and just fucking work on this thing for an hour, so at least I know I tried it, I did it, right? And oftentimes what happens is you end up getting into like a flow state, and you end up being like, oh shit, like once I pushed past the immediate block, I was actually able to get into a flow state, be a bit happier, and just get something done, right? And I'm sort of, I'm like thinking to myself, how the fuck did I even get to this part of the conversation? But I'm bouncing around a bit just to sort of like anybody who feels like they are in a stuck mode right now, or maybe you're not happy with the results or whatever the case may be. Just like I want to bring you some comfort to just slow the hell down a little bit, and let's sort of like seize the day almost, and slow time down as much as we can by just being hyper present to what can get done today, what should I do today, what needs to be done in this moment right now. And again, bringing that awareness in mind of like, what are the things that I'm feeling, what am I lacking, whatever it might be. So this is kind of a bit of a nuanced conversation, I guess, around awareness, around the idea of identity and goals. And I'm big on goal setting, but also having a realistic conversation about not letting yourself be overcome by the identity you've created or the goals that you've set, that you sort of ignore the human being inside of you, who may have a different vision for life than they did a year ago, a week ago, whatever it might be, right? So all just things we're talking about today. So I just kind of wanted to brain dump sort of what I've been thinking about, practices I've been trying to instill, and just sort of the inspiration, I think, for this conversation that we had in my mastermind group that I just want to share with everybody. You'll hear Antonio, who he was on the podcast a couple episodes ago. He's got a really dope podcast called Multiracial Verse podcast that I was a guest on. You can check out that episode. And yeah, he has set out on this journey of podcasting, and that was one of his goals. And I love using sort of him as an example because he's somebody who really dove headfirst into it. And now, because he has been giving it his all, he really can stop for a second and reflect and say, okay, I've done the work. I've given it my best effort. I have really engulfed myself in this. Now let me assess, is it really making me happy? Is it doing this for me? Is it doing what I thought it would? Is it really what I wanted it to be, right? Because he actually has put in the work where he now can trust the sort of instincts and information that's coming back to him, right? And we'll talk about like how hard it is to find that balance of like, am I giving up because it's hard, or am I moving on because I'm no longer interested, right? All those things are like really difficult questions to ask ourselves, and they pertain to everything, not just like creative endeavors or career, but relationships and every aspect of life. These are sort of human questions that we ask ourselves. So we're gonna just jump into this conversation that we had a few weeks ago for the Just Be Social Club, and that's sort of what I wanted to share today. I just thought this was a really important conversation to have, particularly as we are kind of at this midway point in the year, especially summer is coming up. Things really move quickly from here on out, it feels like, even though it feels like they've fucking flown by already. So I think it's important to sort of just have that check-in with yourself and say, hey, where am I at, and what is it that I want, what's been working, what hasn't been working. And hopefully this sort of conversation between him and I and the club allows you to sort of ask yourself some of those questions and get a better understanding of what it is that you want in your life right now. So without further ado, we'll share the conversation we had in our Just Be Social Club via our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. Last time we did like the meetup, I was talking a lot about like the 90-day sprint. That's what Brent and I were talking about, sort of having like a 90-day goal and doing something to work towards it every day. And I think you're a perfect example kind of in general, you've been doing the podcast thing, hitting it really hard. So I kind of wanted to just, I think, talk about awareness a bit today and just checking in. You know what I mean? I think along the path of having goals or having projects and things like that, just checking in with yourself and seeing how you're feeling about it. I think it's easy to get caught up in it or create the identity. Sometimes we set out on goals and it's not what we thought it would be, right? But we sort of just keep doing it because we're too embarrassed to admit that we were wrong about it, or whatever the case might be, right? The idea of like failure, which it's never really a failure, but that's sort of been implanted in us for a long time. Um, and even just identity wise, this is something I check in with myself a lot, um, on a very consistent basis, and especially recently, is what is this version of me really longing for, and do the goals that I've set, from last year into this year, are they still in line with what really makes me happy, or am I holding on to them just out of like pride of wanting to check them off? Um, and this is where it's a bit of a difficult conversation to decipher, because sometimes it's like, all right, am I quitting, so to speak, because it's getting difficult and I'm not seeing the results I wanted? Or have I truly explored this idea, this goal, and it's just not what I really want now that I'm actually in it? And that's sort of the difficult, I think, thing to be able to sort of weed out, is which one of the two it is. And that's obviously where awareness comes into play, and really taking the time to have a conversation with yourself about where you are, the experience that you have had as a result of setting this goal, the journey you've been on as a result of setting that goal, and is it continuing to fulfill you? Is it continuing to fill your cup, or is it time for a pivot, or is there something else that is calling your name, or whatever it might be? I'm big on not getting too caught up on identity or any of those things, and being very mindful of that, because I think oftentimes what happens is we get caught up on the identity of who we're supposed to be, what we're doing, or whatever it might be. And next thing you know, whatever, 5 years passes by and you've been going in the wrong direction, essentially. So I'm very conscious of that kind of stuff. So I try to check in with myself and try to like remove all of the ego and remove any, superficial attachments to things, and really have a conversation of like, am I doing what makes me happy, or am I holding on to it because like, the world is watching, quote unquote, and if I, walk away from it, it's going to be a failure in the eyes of those around me, or an "I told you so" moment, or whatever it might be, right? So yeah, those are conversations I could see to have with myself, and I thought that would be just kind of a good um topic to kind of toss around a little bit. I think especially with you, you've been really dedicated to this, and going in. So, good, bad, or ugly, I'd love to kind of hear where your sort of awareness is around your energy still for it, and kind of just where your head's at now, having done this. How many episodes are you in again?
I just launched number 13, and I have 14 recorded, and then that new segment today.
Nice. So yeah, you've
Yeah,
been in it. So yeah, so talk to me a little bit about kind of the experience overall.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Like, I actually have been consistently. I have this little notebook here. Probably can't see it because
Yeah.
and then like actually when we first wrote our goals down, I actually taped the goals to my wall, right in kind of in front of my workstation.
Yeah.
But every day at some point, and I'm not going to, I actually write the goals out. I've missed a couple of days, but surprisingly, I haven't beat myself up about it, which is a first. Like,
Nice.
like you were kind of saying, like I'm not attaching myself to perfection,
Yeah.
which I might have in the past. And then what I mentioned, I think I mentioned in one of our chats about the goals kind of evolving.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote them out, and it was really tough because I took on three goals, and then I added one.
Sure.
I took on the podcast, and I'm training for like a long relay race later on this
Nice.
summer. And then one of them was financial,
Mm-hmm.
becoming a better understanding of like how to manage finances. And then I added a lot. The last one I added was just like moving towards being the kind of dad I know I can be or want to be. But I think what has changed is the language has changed from I am going to do, like I've changed it to like very much more active wording. Like I am consistently working out every day, or I'm consistently, doing these things that are helping me get to these final goals. But yeah, I mean, I'm actually, I don't know what day we're in because I was numbering the days with the date, and then when I did realize when I actually missed the days that I kept just numbering the days. So
Sure,
I
sure.
know it sounds like we're in like probably like 25, pretty close to 25 days, I think.
Yeah, something
But
like
I
that.
will have to say,
Yeah.
yeah, I have to say I'm super surprised. Of course, as you mentioned about, once you, you write something down and then you put all your attention on it, then it's in your awareness, which is like a lot of the battle, like always top of
Hmm.
mind. Um, but yeah, I mean, with the health one, I've noticing changes after running. I got on the bike for the first time and biked 5 miles, and like it's and then that also is like the confidence booster of actually following through. There's a
Right.
lot of benefits, not just, oh, I feel healthier, my clothes are fitting better, but like, oh wow, I'm actually following through on the stuff with the social, with the podcast. uh, yeah, I like really hit what you were saying about, am I doing the right thing? And it's like, yeah, you know what? When you said that to me that one time in our meetup, just,
Hmm.
it's a what is it? It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Sure.
You might get lucky and it might hit and then it might take off, but just remember it could be a marathon and you could be running the marathon, and you got to make sure that you enjoy the journey, and
Yeah.
I'm really, really enjoying it, even if it's just like me having these conversations with individuals. It's raising my awareness and it's filling
Hmm.
my soul. And yeah, I think, I part of it was also working harder to drive engagement and other things. And so I start to look at that. I start to do research, read articles,
Hmm.
be more engaged on like threads and other places where there's other podcasters, and I'm learning from, oh yeah, we're doing this or we're doing that. And yeah, just consistently every day I'm doing pretty much a little bit of something with each of the goals. And then with the financial one, I'm doing, being definitely more mindful of that, and attending these financial meetings. I think I put one a week, but I think I've been attending like more than that.
Wow.
And then lastly, the dad one is just really that's just stepping up and being there for my kids. And yeah, I'm really excited because I'm like, oh, when this is done, I'll have to do it another 90, but I'll have to figure it out
Yeah.
on my own or whatever. But yeah, I know it's been going really well, and I think I'm in the right place. I think I set the right goals, which were all areas of I guess would be problem areas / opportunity areas for me to really get to where I feel like I'm reaching full potential.
Yeah, and I love how you talked about not beating yourself up on the times that you didn't do it that day, or fell short or whatever it might be. Because the goal is not for us to be fucking machines. You know what I mean? Like in
Yeah.
reality, it's like life happens, especially as you're an adult. There's a lot of things going on that, there's only but so many hours in the day sometimes. And um the idea is to not be perfect, but the idea is we're setting these goals because it allows us to get closer and closer, right? And that's what it is. Even if you missed one day but you do it the next day, you're still getting closer and closer to where you want to be, right? So it still is a win at the end of the day. And I think that is sort of um, a huge sort of takeaway for you to have. And I think, even sort of, a lot of the things I've been reading about and just about creativity in general and passions and stuff like that, like really what they do, these things that we're passionate about, they put us in a flow state, right? Where we're hyper present. And that is where the sort of negative aspects of life can't get to us when we're in that hyper present moment, right? And that's really the goal at the end of the day. Now, of course, we would love for them to grow and to be able to facilitate more resources to be in that state more often than not. But again, it's like just reminding yourself, it's like anything you could do to get into that flow state is a win, right? Because that's, less time spent worrying about something else, right? And it's more time just spent being present and living in the moment, which is really what we're all striving for, and I think that's sort of the real, like, I think, probably main ingredient to happiness is that hyper presence, right? I would imagine the happiest people on earth are those who are able to just be as present as humanly possible, right? Who are not falling prey to their invasive thoughts and are really just able to enjoy moment by moment what's happening, and that's really the reward from our creative works or the time spent with family and loved ones and things like that. It's that hyper presence, it's that flow, that sort of ease of mind. We're not worried about anything else except for that moment, so that's sort of a beautiful thing. And then also I think even just like as you kind of mentioned, you're able to be proud of yourself, right? Because you're reflecting on you're seeing the progress basically, right? And you're seeing how far you've come, and especially as you begin to sort of get deeper and deeper into it, you're not going to remember that specific day that you missed, but you are going to be able to pinpoint the changes that have occurred as a result of you being on this path, right? Which is the most important thing at the end of the day. And that's, again, really why we set out to do this stuff, and I think, I think that's the real profound thing is being able to take it easy on yourself. I really think that that's like the main, because most of us will beat the shit out of ourselves for not achieving something or not doing something or falling short or whatever it is. And like that is the polar opposite of being in a flow state. That'll take you out of a flow state immediately and just have you hyper fixated on like the worst, darkest thoughts that you possibly have in your head, right? As you beat yourself up. And I think that's sort of what we're trying to steer clear from, and that's why I'm very mindful of even the hyper productivity self-help people, because I think it's like they set this bar of sort of this inhuman, unattainable perfection that I just don't think is a very real thing, or I think doesn't take into consideration a balanced life. It's why I'm hyper like obsessed with professional athletes like the Tom Brady's of the world and like Michael Jordan's, where it's like all this career success but so much personal turmoil at the same time. And as I always say, yes to one thing is a no to something else. And I think if you're trying to get that psychotic level of perfection, something else is obviously going to sort of suffer at the end of the day. And for them, we see it oftentimes with their personal lives and their family. And also, I love how you made a personal thing a part of that sort of 90-day sprint as well, right? And because I think we sort of miss that part as well, where we're like, we sort of almost expect, or I think to a degree, when you get comfortable, you begin to put your personal life in autopilot to a degree, right? And you just sort of expect it to like continue on healthily with little to no maintenance whatsoever, right? And I'm not a married man yet, but I can imagine, in marriage, if you're not hyper vigilant to that, it's very easy to fall into that sort of trap of comfortability. I mean, I know I've been in long-term relationships where that's been the case as well. And I'd imagine with your kids as well, where you begin to sort of, put things off to the next day, and that next day it never comes, and time has gone by very quickly, right? So I think I love the fact that you have sort of, put that as a priority, because it's also like, I had like done some work with like a sort of like a personal growth coach almost, and similar kind of what Brenda does, and they were sort of like trying to get me out of the mindset of like basically what my mind was for a long time, almost like a very workaholic tendency of like anything personal life is like a detriment to my career success almost, right?
Mm.
And what they try to sort of what he helped me a lot with was flipping the script and saying this is actually a thing that nourishes your career because it's sort of a recovery time. Your time off, your time spent just not doing anything work related, will give you the rest that you need to then have clarity in your career and be motivated to do those things, right? And now I view it as like an ecosystem, and recognizing like, man, like I played hooky, last week, and I went like riding bikes with like one of my friends, around the city that I used to live in. And yeah, in like the literal sense that there was no monetary value. In fact, I might have lost monetarily something by spending those like whatever 6 hours I was out doing that, right? But I felt mentally a lot clearer. I was laughing. I was having fun. I just felt rejuvenated a bit by life by just not being in my studio working on things all day, right? And in the long run, moments like that are going to provide me with more of a career benefit because it allowed me to clear my mind a little bit and like get away from it all, right? Like I had new creative ideas when I was driving home from that just as a result of like experiencing life essentially, right? And I think probably any great artist, right? Or I know you're big into like literature and things like that. I mean, they're drawing from their life experience at the end of the day, right? And it's why like people, I think, and I just have like a loose sort of understanding of it, but like Paris in that era when it was like known for like all the creatives and the writers and things like that, where they were all there. I think what was magical was like everybody was inspired by all that was going around, so it was creating the best art at the time because they were truly experiencing life in a very full way, right? They were surrounded by like minds. They were in a beautiful city that was incredibly inspiring, all these different things. And while them, gallivanting and partying around Paris maybe wasn't like financially on the clock providing money, it did then inspire some of their great art and their great writing at the end of the day that, did sort of make their career, right? And I think that is sort of, to me, the healthier balance within everything, that I'm like at this chapter in my life recognizing the value sort of in that as well. So I love that you kind of like on your own took that upon yourself. And I mean, I'm curious on that topic of like awareness. I know we talked about kind of really good sort of things happening. Do you recognize any moments, throughout this journey where maybe you were falling back into old mindsets or old habits, even if it was just for a little bit, that you had to kind of catch yourself and check yourself?
Yeah. I think it's interesting how you just touched on that topic with your life coach because
Mhm.
that had come to mind when you were right before you start talking about it. Was that adding that piece about improving my relationship as a father, as a husband? The dividends have been that it affects the other goals that I'm trying to work on, which
Yeah.
whether it's me pulling away from focusing so much on those to where I can rejuvenate and not think about those, or whether it's just the stuff it does for either my self-esteem or my well-being that then makes it, kind of just as a loop, makes it easier to do the other things.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's only those times where I don't, like in the morning I get up and I'm really enjoying getting up at like 5, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
just doing my thing because it's like I know nobody's going to get out of bed for the most part, and
yeah,
and it's then it's like when I see the clock getting a little bit closer to the time I have to go wake the kids and the wife up or whatever.
yeah.
I
Mhm.
see myself every once in a while just going getting frustrated or angry, but
Right.
it's I've because I just it's tough not to just want to keep going.
Yeah.
But for the most part, no, I think this has been really a positive experience for me because I always wanted to do the gold thing, the writing thing. The writing thing's been I always talk about that, and Yeah, overall, I think, the biggest benefit is, oh, I missed a couple of days riding, or I missed a day riding. It rained for 4 days straight the other day. I rode the bike in the house one day, not, like a stationary bike, but,
Yeah.
and then I didn't get outside to run or ride the bike outside for like 3 more days, but I didn't beat myself up about it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I love, all those things. I mean, it's, that is, again, I think it's just driving home like the power of awareness, and like you can find the little wins in each moment, right? And I think that is sort of the important thing that kind of keeps us going, because it's easy to like, I think we're trained in life to be hyper fixated on the big gigantic leaps forward, right? And like that's what we declare as like a success, or as us, like, being on point or whatever it is. But I really do think it is like a lot of those little victories that happen along the way of us not beating ourselves up, and then being aware of that, right? Or just also just sort of surrendering to it all, right? Where it's like, I'm not trying to control everything too much, or it's like the fucking weather, I can't control the fact that I'm not going to be able to go out there and run, because it's raining, for 4 days straight or whatever it might be. And just sort of being okay with the way things, have panned out unexpectedly, even just on an hour to hour, day to day basis as well, right? And I think the fact that you're doing all of these other things then sort of allows you to not take the other stuff so seriously, or beat yourself up so much about it, right? And I think that is sort of the power of it all. It's like you can confidently look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm showing up each and every day, right? And that allows you to sort of not overvalue the negative voice that would have beaten you up about missing a day of running or whatever it is, right? And I think, again, that's why I talk. It's like the idea of just taking action in some way, shape, or form, it will alleviate so many of our problems or so many of our anxieties and things like that. Because it just allows us to sort of be able to look at ourselves and say we're doing it, and maybe the right door hasn't been unlocked yet, but at least I know I'm putting myself out there for opportunity to find me, essentially, right? I'm giving myself the best chance of crossing paths with whatever result it is that I'm looking for at the end of the day. And then even, the fact that you're getting up at 5, and that time to do so, man, like you're feeding your soul, right? You're taking the time to do that, which is a beautiful thing. I think the fact that you don't want it to end, it is also a sign of just how much you're enjoying it, and how great that is. I mean, and for me, it's the same thing. I try to get up at like 6, and I'll write for like an hour, and do that whole thing, and meditate, do my whole morning routine. And that's already like a win right there. I'm starting my day off with a win, and I could see the difference between when I do start my day in that way and when I don't. It's like utter chaos. It feels like utter chaos almost, right? And I think that's the other part right there. It's like, yeah, you got to put your dad hat on and do those things, right? Those are responsibilities that you have. So now you're finding a way to find that balance of like, at least you're going to also give yourself the other part of yourself that you need to have, right? You're going to work on the other things that really light you up as well, and make sure they're a part of your life, and figure out ways to fit that into the life you have, right? Because I think a lot of times we've been taught to sort of just like take on the societally accepted narrative of what an adult life is supposed to look like, and then it's like that is sort of what you base the rest of your life around, right? And I think it's human nature to want to have some semblance of control over how we spend our life and our day and things like that. And that takes us actively figuring out where and when we can take that control and take that time for ourselves. And that's a healthy sort of thing at the end of the day. And I mean, it's reflective in sort of just seeing how you show up now versus when we first, got together and things like that. And not to say there's anything wrong with the, version of you who showed up when we first met, but it's a, it's a different person, there's a different energy, there's a different light that's coming from that, and I think that's such a beautiful thing to be able to sort of just reflect on in anything, as we move forward. I mean, and as we kind of like start to close out the conversation, is there anything that is glaring to you or bringing out any sort of like apprehension or anything like that moving forward for you with everything?
No, but what I did want to add was,
Yeah.
I think the beauty in doing it this way, and I know Brenda's on. She might be listening. And I feel like by doing it this way, I've been tweaking. I thought it was just going to be like, okay, I want to run X and I want to be
Yeah.
able to do X, and and it's actually when I'm sitting down and I'm writing them out, I'm like going, wait a second, I'm thinking about, I'm writing them down on another page, like what are the steps that I need to take to get, like, okay, I'm gonna research blogs about podcasts and see how they're cutting up their content and see
Right.
how they're measuring success, and am I measuring success with the goals that I set in a way that is going to, is best suits what I want to do with
Sure.
my podcast, So I think that's been the beauty of it, is that it's constantly evolving. Even just the original thought of like, here's the goal: run faster, balance the budget, and grow social media for my podcast. And it's become so much more, by writing them down and like examining those expectations and those things every day. So
Yeah, it's like the tinkering, and I think that is what keeps it fun. I'm sure we've all been in a job where we got bored and just was like, it was too easy almost, right? There was like nothing challenging, and it is soul crushing, and I think even like I have like I had gotten a classic car recently, and like there's always something going wrong with the car because it's an old car, right? But like that's why people have a passion for it, because it's like they're always tinkering with something, right? It's never done. There's always some stupid thing that happens, and that's like annoying, but it's half the fun for like a person who loves classic cars, because there's always something to mess around with, right? That's a part of the hobby. It's not just the driving, but it's adjusting little things here and there. And I think that is sort of what we're missing, what many people are missing, or we don't sort of realize. It's like you don't want the necessarily just easy thing, because that turns you into a zombie at the end of the day. Like you want something that continues to kind of evolve, and you leaving yourself open to it evolving and your goals evolving and the way you approach them evolving is sort of what keeps this fun and interesting and keeps you energized about it at the end of the day, and it's also just like the idea of why you can only plan for but so much. I think that reiterates like the idea of why this has to move beyond your notebook, but then also into real world practice, right? Because you can plan, but like there's things along the way that are going to happen that will inevitably force you, whether you want to or not, to have to readjust that plan, right? So it's like, why would you waste, too much time not starting when you're still going to have to deviate and figure things out on the fly, right? So you might as well just kind of keep going with it. And yeah, man, I think that's also just a healthy mindset. It's like to allow yourself to find the fun in the fact that it's constantly changing and evolving, and like the hunt for, trying to find the key that fits in that particular moment, knowing that it's ever changing, because I think also in the creative journey, we lose sight of that being a part of the fun, and we fixate so much on the end result, right? Or even like as a writer, I'm sure like, you could be having an idea for a storyline and then it just changes as you go, right? And you change it to something better and you adjust certain things, right? But like that's half the fun of the writing process. If you allow it to be that, it's you flexing your creative muscle and just trying different things and tinkering around at the end of the day. So I think that is sort of a practice that we can sort of try to apply to every aspect of our life and find the little joys in that, man. So dude, just keep it going. I commend you so much for what you're doing and the consistency of it all. It's inspiring to watch from afar. So definitely a lot to be proud of. And I think the only real homework I would sort of give on the idea of awareness, I think as we're like getting closer and closer to a year of this whole thing, is make notes, like if you have the time to physically like write it down or put it in your phone, of the times where maybe those intrusive thoughts or those past sort of cycles um show themselves, even if it's just for a split second, and make a note of how you reacted to them, right? Because I think that allows you to also see, like, man, a year ago I would have been so frustrated by this that I would have like sat in anger or sulked about it for the next couple of days. And now I felt the emotion come up and I was able to move past it quickly, make note of those moments, because I think it's important to also just be reflecting on the journey of how far we've all come since it's sort of just like having these conversations, and the way that they've, in a lot of some, because the work a lot of times is like sort of subconsciously, the way that it's begun to reshape maybe certain habits or thought processes that we had. So yeah, that'll be the kind of homework. And any questions for me or anything like that, anything you want to mention before we hop off?
No, I'm just enjoying this process. I also think it's raised my awareness to where I'm listening, like some of the other podcasts I listen to or some of the other things I read. Since it gives me also additional material to maybe not for the specific goal, but for ways. I'll hear little things, like I heard this podcaster, his guest talking about, he was like a scientist, but he was talking about doing goals, and he was talking about, so what's the activation energy? We use this in chemistry a lot, he said, and I was sharing it actually with Gabriella, and he said, if you're having trouble getting started, like start to look at like what is the activation energy that you need to get it out. And one of the things was I wanted to ride my bike, and so after I heard that podcast, I actually got the bike out like he had talked about, pumped up the tires, took the helmet, put it on the thing, and it sat down there for like a week.
Sure.
But it was there as a reminder. And finally, yesterday, I jumped on it, and I thought about like, oh, this is gonna hurt because we have some big hills in the town where we live. But
yeah,
so it's just when it's more in your awareness, like you can find little bits and pieces of things from everywhere if you're open to saying, oh, if I'm listening, like there's other things that are going to help me achieve these goals too. So
yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. I think there's inspiration all around us. You just have to have the awareness to see it, and also know like that, okay, it's time for me to like force myself to listen to something or watch something that might activate an idea in my mind. You know what I mean? If I'm in like a lull, I'm like, all right, let me go look through like Earn Your Leisure's like list of episodes that I haven't heard, and let me go like hear somebody talk about business. And like generally what happens, they'll say something that clicks, I'll get energized, and I don't even make it like entirely through the episode, but I'm just energized, and then just looking, or just like on a whole nother voyage of something that's creatively energizing me that I needed in that moment. So yeah, great point there. But yeah, man, thank you so much for hopping on. Always good catching up. And yeah, anything else, as always, just reach out any way, and we'll keep on talking. But big shout out to everybody who's a part of the Just Be Social Club. I absolutely love hosting this mastermind, and this community that we've been building together is just absolutely amazing. So just amazing to see people's results and all they've been doing. Big shout out to Antonio as well. Just some great insight into his own experience and everything. It's just been really, really incredible to watch. Just love that. Now, with that said, I'll tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, so I'll keep it kind of short and sweet. I think we kind of got into everything that I wanted to touch on today. But I think it's important, I think, to have these sort of checkpoints in your year, in your journey. I think there's times to be 100 miles an hour, foot on the gas towards your goals, and I think there's times to sort of just let up and assess, and sort of just look around, like, where am I? Where have I gone? How have I gotten here? How am I feeling about the journey thus far? And I think right now, again, as we're like at this halfway point in the year, we are pretty much getting ready to kick off summer. For some people, college has ended, school's about to end for your kids, and again, we're just going to be sort of in a bit more of a, I guess, celebratory mode when just summer comes along, depending on where you are listening to this. I don't know, how it is for everybody. Definitely us here in like the Northeast, where we go through some brutal weather. The summer, it just feels like we're sort of in autopilot oftentimes, right? And the summer sort of flies by, and we're doing a lot of activities, and we're enjoying ourselves, which is amazing. But I think it also could be conducive to us sort of like losing a bit of, I don't want to say our edge, but you're not as invested in all that you're working on because there's so many other distractions going on, and truthfully, much needed distractions. But I think right now is a good point, especially if you have been sort of working towards something, or it's been a year of reflection for you, or goal setting or change or whatever it might be. Like midway through the year, really just checking in, like, where am I? Who am I? What do I want? Are the things that I've been doing fulfilling me? What have I been learning about myself? What do I want the rest of my year to look like? What has been working? What hasn't been working? Am I as passionate about this thing that I thought I was, or is it time for me to possibly make a pivot? And I think all of those things, whatever sort of process you could do, if you could take a day for yourself or a few hours and just like journal it out, like talk to yourself, meditate on what this year has been like for you. What have you learned along the way, and how can you apply it to the rest of the year? And really just reflect on the entire journey that you've been on thus far, and maybe I make too much of like time periods. Like I love New Year's just because it feels like a fresh start, and I think I sort of create these, and I guess it's healthy, but like these much needed milestones or whatever in the journey. And it feels like right now is a good place to sort of check in with oneself and just have an honest conversation about the person that you see in the mirror and how you feel about them. And this isn't an opportunity to beat the shit out of yourself, right? This is to look at yourself and give yourself grace for things that you could be doing better, but also to celebrate all the things that you are doing, that, be grateful for all that you do have as well. This is really, I think, a great way to have a bit of a reset, especially if you're lucky enough. Like we're going into, here in the States at least, we're going into like a 4-day, weekend. So now would be the time to really check in and give yourself a little bit of extra me time if you can, and say, hey, what do I want the rest of the year to look like? What do I really want? Where am I? Who am I? And I think it's important to take time for ourselves to do those things regularly, but especially when we can sort of pinpoint time on the clock, like, all right, halfway through the year, what's been working? What can we do to really just elevate for the rest of 2024? And that's what I encourage everybody listening to begin to do, take advantage if you can this weekend, and just that self-awareness muscle, really keep developing it, keep questioning everything, and shaking things up and seeing what is working for you and what isn't. Our lives are ongoing work, right? Just like any relationship, our relationship with self is ongoing, and you have to be willing to continue to adjust and pivot and move things around and shake things up as needed when you feel like you aren't getting out of it what you need, right? Or even when you need to just maintain it, even when you're happy, that still takes work to maintain, right? To upkeep it. So just all these things to consider and to take time for, and to, again, just look yourself in the mirror and see what it is that you need, you want in this moment. So that's what I encourage you to do. I'm definitely going to try and do that. I think I only have, I lied. I'm like making it seem like I have off this weekend, but I'm traveling Thursday into Friday, but I'll be back home Friday evening, and I'm not DJing again until Sunday night. So I have a little bit of extra time that I normally wouldn't have. I have Friday night, Saturday night, to just sort of chill out a little bit and reflect. So I'm definitely going to take advantage of that. And then Monday, actually, too, I guess. Monday is actually Memorial Day, so I'll take off Monday, and hopefully sleep and just relax. But yeah, you didn't need to know my whole weekend plans, but that's them if you're wondering. With that said, that's it. Have an amazing Memorial Day weekend. Take that time for yourself. Take some time if you can. I know some people got families. I know people got lives. Some people don't even get off from work, so I get it. But where you can, try to carve out a little bit extra time. Just sit down, get a journal, meditate, put on some binary beats, some theta waves if you can. So you can search for that like Spotify or Apple Music or wherever you listen. iHeart Radio app, whatever it is. I'm sure you can find some playlists or YouTube, and just throw those on and journal, meditate, and just reflect on all that you've done. Be proud of yourself. Be kind to yourself for things that maybe you're not proud of or happy with, but always, treat yourself with respect and have empathy, but have a real conversation at the same time, and realign, readjust, and be ready to take on the rest of 2024. So with that said, I'll catch y'all on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. Till then, stay safe, and we'll talk soon. Peace.